All right. Hello and welcome to today's Yellowfin training webinar. Now, this particular session is designed to focus on formatting throughout the system. So we'll be looking at table and report formatting as well as charts and system-wide defaults. Now, if you haven't been to one of these sessions before, we run them once a month, and they're really designed to help you explore areas that maybe you don't have much familiarity with, or you just want to learn a little bit more about. They are trainings webinars, so if you do have any questions, we really encourage those. Ask them anytime through the session, whenever you think of them, and just do so through the question box on the right hand side of your screen. So all the attendees are muted, but I will periodically check those and read them out as we go. Also, if I do leave your question until the end, don't worry. It might just mean that we're covering it later, or it's better left to extra time. All right, so what we're going to start out with is normally we would start with a storyboard slideshow, but there's quite a lot of formatting in Yellowfin, so we're just going to dive straight in and cover as much as we can. So if you're not familiar with Yellowfin, we're going to start creating a report by clicking on, funnily enough, Create and Report. And basically what this does is takes us to the first step of our report builder. And in this particular training session, we're going to be using the drag and drop builder, which I would say the majority of reports are created with, especially those created by business users. It's a far more flexible system. There are some more advanced options, but we're going to go with that today. The next thing we do is select our view. Now, if you're unfamiliar, basically a view is a set of fields that you can put into your report. So if you're not sure which one you want to use, you can hover over the name, click View Details, and you'll get a list of what's inside that view. If you're not sure, it's probably actually best to ask whoever created the views in your system, or ask if there's any sort of documentation on what you should use for particular purposes. But today we're going to be using our Ski Team view, and this is a tutorial database that we use for training purposes with Yellowfin, so it's just a little database. All right, so let's get stuck in. Now we're in the actual builder, we're on the data step, and this is where we start building out the table for our report. Every single report will have a table. Some will have charts as well. Some will hide the table and only display charts, but there'll always be one behind the scenes. So this is where we start. So on the left, we have our fields. And I won't go into hopefully too much more detail about how to build a report, but basically you just select the fields you're after and drag them either into this preview area or the columns and rows area. Okay, so what you'll notice here is I've got a very basic report, and if you've used Yellowfin before, we actually normally have a blue header for our table. But one of the things I'm going to show you today is how to customize the look and feel of your table. You can firstly do that at the report level. So I could do that now and say, look, I really don't like that grey. I'm going to set it back to the blue that we normally use. Okay, so that looks a little bit more familiar to some of you maybe, hopefully. Alternatively, we can customize it however we like. As a side, we're just going to move on and come back to that formatting, because there is a way to apply formatting options across the entire system. So you can set up your defaults, and we'll have a look at that as well. So I'm just going to continue building up this report, and we'll have a look at what some of these fields look like when we drag them in. So maybe we'll put some athlete information in there. And we might put, what else might we put? Demographic. Okay, so what we have here is a relatively basic table. It's not very complex, but it doesn't look as good as it could. So best practice wise, if I'm looking at this particular report, there's a couple of things I'd notice, and you would notice them if it was your particular business data. So what I'm seeing here is one of our fields is called sum invoice amount, which is named this way because it's the invoice amount from our invoice table. So it's whatever was charged to the customer on our invoice, and it's been summed up. Now, that all makes sense, but generally speaking, we don't want to see that in a report. That's more of a behind the scenes kind of naming convention. So what we're going to do is just go to Format. Now, there's a few ways you can do this. So if you missed it, basically I clicked on the arrow on the top of my column here, and I went to Format, and from there I just click on Edit. Now, alternatively, so I'll just show you that. So it opens up this column formatting menu, and it has my field selected. So alternatively, what I could do is hover over the field in this list at the top and do exactly the same thing. And the third way of doing it is going straight to the column formatting menu and selecting the field I want to edit. So from here, all the options on the right-hand side relate to this selected field. So from here, I might call this sales. I might also rename this average age at camp because it's a little long, so we'll just call it average age. We're always going to know it's at camp because our business is ski camps, and that's okay. All right, so instantly that's a little better. The next thing we might want to do is add some totals onto this table. So if I scroll down, you'll see there's no total, so I can't see the grand total, sales or anything like that. So again, we're going to go into our little menu here, and we go to totals. Now, what we need to do here is really consider how we want to sum up or aggregate, I should say, my field for the total. Now, this sales figure has been summed, okay? So we're totaling by demographic and year. So we probably want to apply a similar total using the same aggregation. So we'll go totals and sum. Okay, so you can see we've got our grand total down the bottom. Now we'll do the same thing with average age, except if I picked total sum, what it would do is sum up all the average ages, and that's really not going to be beneficial. So what I'm going to do instead is average. And you'll see I get the overall average. Now the next thing I'm going to point out here is that we have some repeating values. And I'm not talking about the average ages, I'm talking about my label values, so my year values. And that's fine, but generally speaking, we want to make our reports as easy as possible to read. So one of the ways we can do that is kind of group these values together. Now, we don't want to lose all of these unique rows for each demographic within 2009. We just simply want to clean up this the repeating list. So what I'll do is just format this particular field, and we'll enable this suppress duplicates option on the year field. All right, so we'll go to year, suppress duplicates. Okay, so you can see we've got the same rows there, but we've just tidied it up a little bit. Now, the next logical step a lot of the time here is to apply a subtotal. So we've effectively got a grouping by year, and then we want to see our sort of sales total for 2009. So what we'll do is go back into our year field, and instead of looking at the display area, we're going to summary. And we're not going to apply a total to the year because we don't want to sum up the years themselves. We don't want to average the years, things like that. We just want to use it as a subtotal, so sort of like a heading. And then what happens is any columns that already have a total applied, so our sales and our average year, will populate that subtotal. So you'll see what I mean. So here's our subtotal, and there we get our values. Okay, so we actually have a question, which is, it's a good one. Is that average of averages or I read that poorly. Let me read that again. So basically what this person is asking is the total an average of these averages, or is it working it out as a real average calculation? So it's taking all of the data set and averaging it as a total. It's a good question. Basically, these aggregations are done in Yellowfin, so they're not done in the SQL. So this is actually an average of average. So what Yellowfin does is, if you're familiar with SQL, we'll have a look at that. Basically what it's done is it's averaged our age at camp by these grouping fields, so demographic and year date. So each of these is a proper average, so it's done at the database. Then what Yellowfin does is purely take these overall averaged values and work out the average of those. So it's an average of average, to answer your question. If you didn't follow that, don't worry too much, unless you're the person that asked the question, in which case let me know and I will clarify. Okay. Yeah, but that is a really good question. And the same sort of scenario applies with charting aggregations, because sometimes what you'll do when you're creating a chart, which we'll look at in a little bit, is you'll put in something like year and average age. So you'll lose that demographic. And what it will effectively do is the same thing. So it'll work out the average of average for that. So our charts don't necessarily well, they actually don't ever run a separate query different to the table. So hopefully that makes sense. But if I've rambled, let me know. Okay, so this report is looking a lot better. But what I'm going to show you now is a different way of grouping our values and working out the totals by year. So instead of including the year field in my table, what I'm going to do is just move that across to my section. And what this effectively does is create a mini table for each year value. So it's effectively the same results as before, it's just displayed differently. And currently I'm in the data step, which is just purely sort of a preview step. So it doesn't always show you the whole report. It normally just shows you a snapshot of it, or it's a small amount, I should say. So what we're going to do is just go through to the output step, which is where you preview the real report. So you'll see here as we scroll down the page, we have a little table for each of our years. So that's sectioning. Now there's a few different ways you can achieve different displays for this. So what we're going to do is go into our section formatting. And what you'll notice is throughout the steps of this builder, our formatting options are always in this panel in the middle. So they're in this main navigation area. So if you're wanting to format, go there. And if you hover over each item, if you're not familiar with the icons yet, it'll give you a little name. So we want section formatting, and we only have one section at the moment, or one section field. So we click on that and we have 3 display options. So we have single page, which basically means that we're going to see each of the tables running down the whole page. So we'll just be scrolling to see all of the data rather than moving between pages. If we select multiple page, we'll be moving between pages. So let me go back. And basically what we do here is just arrow through this list. So if I go back into sections, the last option we have here is tabbing. And personally, I quite like this one if your users are sort of logging into Yellowfin and accessing the system. If they're looking at a printout, it's not as good. So here I have my little tabs and I can navigate through those. Oops, there we go. All right. Good question. So this person has asked, can you still view the overall totals for the data set or just the totals by year? So at the moment, obviously, we're seeing the totals by year. I might just quickly change the view back so that it's single page. You beat me to it, the person that asked that question. But basically what we do is go into sections and we go into summary and we can enable this section summary. We can also enable grand totals. Okay, so our little summary table is at the top here. And if we scroll down to the bottom, we also have our grand totals. So the section summary has effectively given us the total row for each of our years, and it's also linked, so I could select one and navigate down. Now, if I remove that, just to make it a little clearer what's going on, all right, so do I turn that off or on? There we go. Section totals, perfect. And all right, I turned the wrong thing off. Okay, so now if I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see we get the grand total. So it depends on what you're after. If you're purely after this grand total row, it's always going to appear at the bottom of your list. Alternatively, if you want that overall view, you can turn on the section summary. Hopefully that answers that. All right, so another thing we're going to do is just remove this year. And then we're going to look at some formatting that we can apply to our data. So let me just change that. So the first thing we're going to have a look at is date formatting. So what I've actually got here are dates. So I'm just going to drag those in. Don't worry too much about how revolting this particular report looks at the moment. This is just an example. So what we have here is our invoice date, and currently that's formatted just purely as a date. If I go into my format menu, there's a lot of different ways you can display this. So if you want to format it as a date, you can select some of these presets. So you could change it to have sort of little dashes between the values and things like that. Alternatively, you can put your own custom item in. So for example, one that we commonly would use would be this. I might have put that in wrong. It might be capitals. Yes, it is. I just wanted to demonstrate what happens if you put it in wrong. So basically, we'll use capitals there. So basically what it is underneath, that's still a full date. So that's coming back from the database as, you know, the 13th of April or something like that. And what it does is just pull the month component and the year from there. Now, if you're not really familiar with these codes, as a lot of people may not be, basically you just take them from these examples. So you can see here, okay, well look, I want to display my date as a short month name, so the first 3 letters, and then I want a comma, and then I want my year, but I don't really need the full year, I just need the last 2 digits. So you go through and you go, okay, well this one has that short month, so I'll grab those 3 M's. And where is one with the short year? Okay, there's one with the short year, so I'll grab the Y's. All right. So we have another question, and this one's about the date formatting. After formatting the date, does it group the table differently according to the format? That's a really, really good question. No, not in this scenario. Basically what happens here is this is kind of just applying a mask. So what it's doing is it's keeping the actual unique date, so the 14th, the 15th, the 16th of April and so on, but it's just applying that mask of April '09 over the top. If you did want to change the grouping based on your format, what you would do is create a date hierarchy field, and this is something that you do in the view. And what you would do is make sure you create that field based on the component you want to group by. So, for example, let me show you what I'm talking about because it's a little bit hard to understand me. So let me get rid of this field. So what we've actually done in Yellowfin is in the view builder, we give your administrator or whoever sets up your view access to a whole lot of date hierarchy calculations, which actually use database functions to pull out pieces of a date. Now, don't worry if that's a little bit too tech for you. Basically, what happens is they take your unique date, so the 13th of April, the 14th of April, and so on, and they'll convert it. So say you just want to group by month and year. What you can do is get your administrator to create a date that's what we call a month start date. So what it does is it looks at your unique dates. So let me just drag those in again and have a look. And we'll just clear the formatting on that field. Yes. Okay, so you can see the 19th of April, the 25th of April. What the result will be the first of whatever month and year it is. So the 1st of April 2009, the 1st of April 2009. When the values are together like that, they will be grouped. So we have an example of that. So what we did was we actually created a month date field based on our invoice date. So our administrator did the fancy calculation, which is actually pretty easy once you get the hang of it. We drag this in, and the administrator has kindly formatted this as a month name for us. But if I edit this, what you'll see, let me put it back to date, is we've got the 1st of April, the 1st of May, June, and so on. So if I put in my invoice date, what you can see here is the conversion went from the 19th to the 1st, the 25th to the 1st. So it's grouping everything by their month. So if I just change this format, and we'll put in the format we just had, okay, so you can see what it's done. Now if I remove these unique dates, you can see it's actually grouped these values together. So hopefully that makes sense. So if you want to group your fields up by month and you have the records at the date level, so you have transactions every day or every hour or whatever you have, what you need to do is create a date hierarchy field. And you can look that up in the wiki. So if I just jump back to the wiki and show you that, or jump to the wiki, we haven't been there yet, and we go into views, view creation, calculated fields, date hierarchy. You could just search for it, but you know, I like to go the long way. If you come in here, there's a little video on how to use these fields. And if you're not the person creating your view, point your administrator to this page and they can do it for you. All right, so that's your date formatting. What else are we going to do? Okay, so let's do some formatting of our fields. So another thing we can do is apply what we call an advanced function. So let's get rid of this average age and put in our invoice amount. All right, so what we're going to do is work out the percentage of total that our sales make up out of our overall sales. So we've dragged in another copy of this sales figure. We're going to advanced function and we're going to do percentage of total, if I can find it. And what that does is it looks at this figure, looks at the total and works out the percentage. Now at the moment this is a little hideous And the reason behind that is that this field has inherited the formatting from the view. So what we need to do is just go to Format. We'll change this to be percentage of total. We'll get rid of this $ as the prefix, and we'll actually put a percentage as the suffix. Okay, so that's a little bit nicer. We could also, if we wanted to, extend the decimal places. So I know a lot of people like multiple decimal places when we are looking at percentages. Another thing we can do, because we're not sick of formatting yet, is we can go to Format, and instead of displaying the numeric value for the percentage, we can convert that to a bar. So what you can see is this is now 46.83% of the width of this area. So it's giving us a little visual of what's going on there. We could also then, if we wanted to, sort this so it's a little bit easier to read. You could format it, so we could go in and say, well, actually, I want that to be centered, and so on. So that's a little inbuilt bar chart. Another thing we can do, what else can we do? That's probably enough just about for the report level. The last thing we'll have a look at is applying some conditional formatting, which will then carry on through to the chart builder. So let me just get rid of that. So I'm going to drag this field in again, and we'll just sales, get rid of that. Okay, so now I've got my sales here. What I might want to do, actually, I probably want to leave that prefix in. What I might want to do is apply what we call conditional formatting. And this is basically changing the display of the cell based on the value of the cell in comparison to a rule that we've defined. So let's go to Format, and instead we'll go to Conditional Formatting, which is also this menu up here. And what we're going to do is use a basic alert type. And there's two types of conditional formatting. Basic means you change the cell based on purely the value in that cell. So if your cell says red, you're going to make it red. If it says blue, you're going to make it blue, that kind of thing. If you go for the advanced option, what you can say is, well, if your cell says blue and the year is 2013, make it light blue. If the cell says blue and the year is 2014, make it dark blue. So basically, an advanced conditional format allows you to have multiple rules on one cell. So we're going to go with basic, and the reason we're doing this is because only the basic rules are compatible with charts at this point in time. So the next thing we're going to do is select the style. We have 4 different styles available to us. The first is a bar, which basically converts the numeric value in the cell to a bar, much like the percentage bar that we just saw. The second option is cell, and this is going to change the background color of the cell. The third is an icon, which basically converts the numeric value to a little icon, which is a tick, a cross, a traffic light, something like that. And the fourth item is text, which changes the font color within the cell. I'm going to go with cell because it's very obvious what's happening. And then we're going to go with the type. Now, I'm basically going to just compare it to itself. So we're just going to purely look at the value in the cell. If I wanted to, I could compare it to another column. Say if I've got my sales and a budget column. Things like that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a range between 10 million, going to need some more zeros than that, and 30 million, and we'll close that. All right, so what you can see here is it's highlighted the cell that matches our rule. So what we're going to do is just go into the chart and have a look at that. So I'm going to create a bar chart and we're going to put our fields in there. Okay, so there's our chart. So the next thing we're going to do is apply that conditional formatting, because it'll be really good to be able to visually see on this chart where our target range lies, or whatever our range is for. So on the field that has the alert or the conditional formatting, we go to settings. You'll see we have this conditional area. Now, if you don't have this, it means you haven't set up your conditional formatting on your table correctly, or perhaps you're looking at the wrong field. So I'm just going to go in, I'm going to turn the display on, and now we have three options here. So the first is align, and we'll use that. Basically what that does is show us the start of our range. So that's at the 10 million mark. This is okay, but because we have a range, it's not ideal. So we're just going to go back in, and we're going to change this to bar. And basically what this does is highlight any bar that falls within the range. Now this is really eye-catching, and it can be used very, very well, especially kind of on a dashboard level, on a very high level. The only drawback with this option is that you don't actually know where the threshold sits. So I don't know if this culture bar was very close to being in the correct range. I don't know if this sport bar was close or far away. I don't know if the range was purely like sort of here to here. No idea. I definitely know that relaxation falls within the range, so if that's all I need, that's fine. But if I need to know how close other areas were, then maybe I need to consider another option. And luckily we have one more option, so we're going to change that to area. And this highlights the whole area. So you can see this sport field was actually incredibly close to falling within that range. So that gives us a lot more information, in fact the most of the three displays. Alright, so we actually have a question. Can the rule of conditioning be dynamic and not a predefined number? It can. And what you would do for that is compare it to a field. Yes, so the next person has actually asked that as well, which is good. So for example, the next question says, can the threshold value be grabbed from a database rather than hard-coded in Yellowfin? For example, a KPI from a database. Yes, it definitely can. So let's show you how to do this. So let's go back into our data. I'm going to get rid of this field. I'm going to clear this conditional formatting, so we'll just get rid of that. It's junk, we don't want it. And now what we're going to do is pretend that what are we going to do? We'll pretend that our estimate, no, actually that's always less. What can we do? Yeah, that one will do. So we'll pretend that this is our budget, okay? So we want to compare it to our KPI that's in the database. So what we'll do is we apply our conditional formatting, and instead of just purely comparing it to the value within the cell, we'll compare it to another column. And we select our target column, which was this preferred currency. So pretend that's our budget field. Actually, you know what? I'm going to rename it so that it's very clear what's going on here. So pretend this is your budget or your KPI or whatever. So we go back in, and I hit the wrong menu, of course, just keeping you on your toes. So here we go. We're going to compare this sales field to our budget field. And we're going to say when it's greater than our budget field, make it green. Huzzah! And when it's less than, make it red. And when it's equal to, make it blue. Okay, or maybe make it yellow just to make it clear. Okay, so we'll close that. So what you can see here is most of the time our figures are above our budget, so that's excellent. But sometimes they're less. So if we go into our charting area and have a look at that, what we're going to do is change it so that we've actually highlighted like our cells. And basically, we have another question. I will come back to that in a minute. So basically what's happening now is every time the report is run, it's going to fetch the sales figures as well as the budget figures. And, you know, if they've been updated, they'll be updated in the report. And suddenly we might find that relaxation is below budget or something like that. So next month they may change. So that will be dynamic. All right, so the next question is, can we display the line chart for a calculated field total? I'm not entirely sure I know what you mean. You can use a calculated field in the chart. If you're wanting to display a total line as well as all of the other lines, you can do that as well. So you could do a union query to add an extra row that gets the total for everything. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if I haven't answered your question, because I'm not entirely sure what you're trying to do there. Okay, so another thing we're going to have a look at here is some of the formatting options available to charts. So I'm just going to add another chart. And what we'll do is we'll add a pie chart because I love them. And what we'll do is we'll add our fields in. And there's our pie. Okay, it's pretty basic. So what we can do here is I'll show you a whole range of formatting options just to see what you can, you know, the sort of the tip of the iceberg of what you can do to charts. So the first thing we're going to do is add labels. So I'll go to my label menu, I'll turn those on. And with pie charts, you get the opportunity to enable 3 components in the label, or a combination of the 3. So the category is basically the color segment. So in this case, it's the demographic values. The value is the raw data. So for example, our sales figure. And the percentage is calculated by the chart builder. So we'll enable all 3 and have a look at those. All right, so there are our labels, but I don't like them. They're a bit ugly. So what I'm going to do is I'll go back in and we're going to customize those. And I'm just going to apply a few options. You can play around with these and get them to match your kind of branding. All right. So there are our options. Now I might actually want to turn off that dollar amount so that the label's a little bit cleaner. You may not, you may need that, but I don't, so I'm going to turn it off. And another thing I'll realize now is that the legend is obsolete because we've replaced it with these labels. So I'll go into the legend area and remove that. The next thing I'll do is go into the settings and I'll customize the look of this a little bit. So we'll just change some colors around. We might change the starting position. Don't worry too much about the specifics here. I'm just giving you an example. Okay, so we've changed that a little bit. Another thing we can do is go into our series and actually set this to be monochrome. And we'll pick a blue. Basically, that colors the pie chart in all sorts of different shades of blue. So you can see here we've got a lot of different formatting options, and depending on the chart, you'll get different options. So, do we have any questions about those? You can do all sorts of things like rotating axis labels, changing the scale, putting reference points in, and things like that as well. Okay. So the next thing we're going to have a look at, if I close this, is changing the default settings for my report and chart formatting options. So to do this, you really need to have a certain level of administrator privileges. You don't need everything, but you do need access to what we call content settings. So I'm going to show you how to get there if you have access. If you don't, you may need to try and get your administrator to do this for you or grant you temporary access or something like that. So I'm going to go into administration, and because some of us may not have seen this page before, I'm going to go into the main admin console. If you're familiar with this, go straight to what we call content settings. All right, so this is the admin console. This is the centralized sort of administration tool for Yellowfin. And basically it lets you monitor and manage all the components in the system. Now, I have all access here because I granted myself all access. But like I said before, you may not have everything here. You may have a smaller set, so you may not have all of the options you see. But hopefully you'll have content settings. So we'll go there. Basically, this page has a range of tabs, and each one has the default settings for the component. So the tabs include report, chart, dashboard, storyboard, and the browse page. So on the report, if we go into styles, for example, and column and row headings, you can see I changed my column headings to be this dark grey. Now, if I go back to blue, or maybe I'll even make it pink just to make it really stand out. Maybe we'll make it bold and white. All right, we might even make it a bit bigger, 16 pixels. And maybe we'll make our data a little bit bigger, so we'll make that 14. Okay, so what happens now is if I save these and go back to a report, so for example my drill tab, you can see all of my reports instantly get updated. Now that pink is not ideal for our branding, but it might be great for yours, or you may have different colors. You may have orange branding or green, something like that. So what happens here is these reports have not been formatted at the report level. So, you know, they may have had some formatting like this bar chart, for example, and suppression of duplicates, but the user hasn't changed this formatting. So because they haven't changed that, the defaults have flowed through. So if I just go back to my content settings and we'll just reset these to what they were before. Oops, there we go. What you'll see if I go back is that they've reverted back. Okay, so it's just something that's controlled purely by administration. We can do the same thing with charts. So if I go back into my content settings and we go to charts, there's a heap of options in here, so do explore them. But the main ones you're going to look at are color defaults, fonts, and the line settings. All right, so we're going to go into the colors. Now, remember we had that pie chart earlier? And basically those colors were coming from this grid. So if we had a pie chart with 3 segments, what would happen is Yellowfin would go to this grid and go, okay, I've got 3, so I'm going to use blue, red, and yellow. If I had 4, I would use blue, red, yellow, and green, and so on. So basically Yellowfin cycles through this grid, uses all of the colors, and then starts again. Now, if I had bars that were gradient shading, what would happen is that I would go from blue to blue. red to red, so the matching position in the grids. Now if I click on these, I can change the color easy enough. And the same goes for the fonts. So I can change all of my font defaults and they'll flow through to my charts as long as I haven't customized them. So, for example, with my pie chart, I did change the formatting of those labels so they won't be affected by the system defaults anymore. Okay, so we've got another question. With the bar chart or a timeline, is it possible to highlight? I'm not sure if that's more than one area in the background, or maybe you could just have a look at your question again. If you're asking if you can highlight multiple ranges, yes, you can. So let's jump back in there and just have a quick look. If you're not, just let me know what I didn't understand. Okay. So what I'm going to do is put conditional formatting on here again, and we'll go with betweens again. Okay, so we've got two different ranges here. All right, so I'm going to go into my charts and we'll create a bar. You could do this with a line. Actually, let's do it with a line, just so that you can see. There's my line chart. It's fabulous. We're going to enable our conditional formatting. We'll show it as an area. Okay, so you can see you've got those two bands. So whatever ranges you've got applied at the table, they'll come through. Now, charts themselves have an opportunity to include what we call a reference line, and these are actually found outside of conditional formatting. So if I go into my axis, and we'll go into my vertical settings and style, you'll actually see that I have a whole lot of options here. So we've got a heap of sort of scale options, prefix options, and things like that. If I go into scale, I can add a reference line. So maybe we want to add a reference line at 70 million. And we'll make it purple and we'll say target. Okay, so we'll close that. So what you'll see is this creates a line at the figure that we've nominated and puts a little label on there. Now this one does have to be hard-coded, or what we call hard-coded. So this can't come from a value in the database at this point in time. It has to be a set value. So it's only appropriate for some scenarios. That's why we have the two options. So we have conditional formatting as well. All right. So we've actually covered the three areas of formatting that we were going to look at. So reports, so the tables themselves, charts, as well as system defaults. If you have any questions, please let me know. I will be around for a little longer to answer those. Otherwise, thanks so much for your time. Hopefully we've opened your eyes and shown you some formatting that you may not have seen before or just haven't tried. And hopefully you'll be creating wonderful looking reports and charts and things. And we look forward to seeing you in future sessions. Now, if you do have suggestions for what you'd like covered in future sessions, please let us know, because we actually design these webinars based on feedback the majority of the time. Unless we don't have requests, then we have to make something up, and that's never as interesting. So if you do have suggestions, let us know. Otherwise, there'll be a video of this up on the website in the next day or so. And thanks so much for your time. All right, so we actually have a question, we have clarification. So is it possible to make the bar that's 2012 green and 2013 blue and so on? Look, at this point in time, that would require what we call an advanced conditional formatting, but we are looking at enabling this. You could also use what we call a reference code, but that's only available for some types. Let me show you, and we'll see what we can do. So let's go back to auto chart, and we'll clear this out. Actually, we'll just try. And we've reset our chart. I'm not going to show. Yeah, trying to think of a way we could do it. Not really, to answer your question, but we are looking at expanding this. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.